Hello, I'm Ruth, and I'm here to welcome you to another session of our Railroader reading. Today I have a couple short stories to read to you from one of our Chicken Soup for the Soul books. The first title of this story is Help for the Helper. At age 18, I left my home in Brooklyn, New York, and went off to study history at Leeds University in Yorkshire, England. It was an exciting but stressful time in my life. For a while trying to adjust to the novelty of unfamiliar surroundings, I was still learning to cope with the all too familiar pain of my father's recent death, an event with which I had not yet come to terms. While at the market one day, trying to decide which bunch of flowers would best brighten up my comfortable but colorless student digs, I spied an elderly gentleman having difficulty holding on to his walking stick and his bag of apples. I rushed over and relieved him of the apples, giving him time to regain his balance. "Thanks, love," he said in that distinctive Yorkshire lilt I never tire of hearing. "I'm quite all right now, not to worry," he said, smiling at me, not only with his mouth, but with a pair of dancing bright blue eyes. "May I walk with you?" I inquired, "just to make sure those apples don't become sauce prematurely." He laughed and said, "Now you are a long way from home, lass. From the States, are you?" "Only from one of them, New York. I'll tell you all about it as I walk." So began the friendship with Mr. Burns, a man whose smile and warmth would very soon come to mean a great deal to me. As we walked, Mr. Burns, whom I'm always addressed as such and never by his first name, leaned heavily on his stick, a stout, gnarled affair that resembled my notion of a biblical staff. When we arrived at his house, I helped him set his parcels on the table and insisted on lending a hand with the preparations for his tea, that is, his meal. I interpreted his weak protest as gratitude for the assistance. After making his tea, I asked if it would be all right if I came back and visited with him again. I thought I'd look in on him from time to time to see if he needed anything. With a wink and a smile, he replied, "I've never been one to turn down an offer from a good-hearted lass." I came back the next day, at about the same time, so I could help out once more with his evening meal. The great walking stick was a silent reminder of his infirmity, and though he never asked for help, he didn't protest when it was given. That very evening, we had our first heart-to-heart. Mr. Burns asked about my studies, my plans, and mostly about my family. I told him that my father had recently died, but I didn't offer much else about the relationship I'd had with him. In response, he gestured toward the two framed photographs on the end of the table next to his chair. They were pictures of two different women, one notably older than the other, but the resemblance between the two was striking. "That's Mary," he said, indicating the photograph of the older woman. "She's been gone for 6 years. And that's our Alice. She was a very fine nurse. Losing her was too much for my Mary." I responded with the tears I hadn't been able to shed for my own pain. I cried for Mary, I cried for Alice, I cried for Mr. Burns, and I cried for my father, to whom I never had the chance to say goodbye. I visited with Mr. Burns twice a week, always on the same days and at the same time. Whenever I came, he was seated in his chair, his walking stick propped up against the wall. Mr. Burns owned a small black and white television set, but he evidently preferred his books and phonograph records for the entertainment. He always seemed especially glad to see me, although I told myself I was delighted to be useful. I was happier still to have met someone to whom I could reveal those thoughts and feelings that until then I'd hardly acknowledged to myself. While fixing the tea, our chats would begin. I told Mr. Burns how terribly guilty I felt about not having been on speaking terms with my father the 2 weeks prior to his death. I'd never had the chance to ask my father's forgiveness, and he had never had the chance to ask for mine. Although Mr. Burns talked, he allowed me the lion's share. Mostly I recall him listening. But how he listened. It wasn't just that he was attentive to what I said. It was as if he were reading me, absorbing all the information I provided and adding details from his own experience and imagination to create a truer understanding of my words. After about a month, I decided to pay my friend a visit on an off day. I didn't bother to telephone, as that type of formality did not seem requisite in our relationship. Coming up to the house, I saw him working in his garden, bending with ease and getting up with equal facility. I was dumbfounded. Could this be the same man who used that massive walking stick? He suddenly looked in my direction, evidently sensing my puzzlement over his mobility. He waved me over, looking more than a bit sheepish. I said nothing, but accepted his invitation to come inside. Well, love, allow me to make you a cuppa this time. You look all done in. How? I began. I thought. I know what you thought, love. When you first saw me at the market, well, I'd twisted my ankle a bit earlier in the day. Tripped on a stone while doing a bit of gardening. Always been a clumsy fool. But when were you able to walk normally again? Somehow his eyes managed to look merry and contrite at the same time. Ah, well, I guess that'll be the very next day after our first meeting. But why? I asked, truly perplexed. Surely he couldn't have been feigning helplessness to get me to make him his tea every now and then. That second time you came round, love, it was then I saw how unhappy you were. Feeling lonely and sad about your dad and all, I thought, well, the lass could use a bit of an old shoulder to lean on. But I knew you were telling yourself you were visiting me for my sake and not your own. Didn't think you'd come back if you knew I was fit. And I knew you were in sore need of someone to talk to. Someone older than your dad even, and someone who knew how to listen. And the stick? Ah, a fine stick that. I use it when I walk the moors. We must do that together soon. So we did, and Mr. Burns, the man I'd set out to help, helped me. He made a gift of his time, bestowing attention and kindness to a young girl who needed both. And the name of the author on that is Marlena Thompson. I have another short story I thought was kind of nice. Just have to find it. Here it is. This is a lot shorter. This is entitled, These Things I Wish for You. And here's a saying by H.W. Beecher. You cannot teach children to take care of themselves unless you let them try. They will make mistakes, and out of these mistakes comes wisdom. And the story, These Things I Wish for You, is written by Lee Pitts. We tried so hard to make things better for our kids that we made them worse. For my grandchildren, I'd know better. I'd really like for them to know about hand-me-down clothes and homemade ice cream and leftover meatloaf. I really would. My cherished grandson, I hope you learn humility by surviving failure and that you learn to be honest even when no one is looking. I hope you learn to make your bed and mow the lawn and wash the car. And I hope nobody gives you a brand new car when you're 16. It will be good if at least one time you can see a baby calf born, and you have a good friend to be with you if you ever have to put your old dog to sleep. I hope you get a black eye fighting for something you believe in. I hope you have to share a bedroom with your younger brother. And it is all right to draw a line down the middle of the room. But when he wants to crawl under the covers with you because he's scared, I hope you'll let him. And when you want to see a Disney movie and your kid brother wants to tag along, I hope you take him. I hope you have to walk uphill with your friends and that you live in a town where you can do it safely. If you want a slingshot, I hope your father teaches you how to make one instead of buying one. I hope you learn to dig in the dirt and read books. And when you learn to use computers, you also learn how to add and subtract in your head. I hope you get razzed by friends when you have your first crush on a girl, and that when you talk back to your mother, you learn what ivory soap tastes like. May you skin your knee climbing a mountain, burn your hand on the stove, and stick your tongue on a frozen flagpole. I hope you get sick when someone blows smoke in your face. I don't care if you try beer once, but I hope you won't like it. And if a friend offers you a joint or any drugs, I hope you are smart enough to realize that person is not your friend. I sure hope you make time to sit on a porch with your grandpa or go fishing with your uncle. I hope your mother punishes you when you throw a baseball through a neighbor's window, and that she hugs you and kisses you when you give her a plaster of Paris mold of your hand. These things I wish for you: tough times and disappointment, hard work and happiness. I thought that was really pretty good. That's a lot of growing up to do. I hope you enjoyed the stories today, and I hope that we see you back again next week. Have a nice day. Thank you.